So this is the little Emax Interceptor FPV car. It's a new product. It's the first sort of ready to run FPV ground vehicles that I've seen in this scale. There were a couple of bigger ones beforehand, and of course people have been making their own for ages. So I've been putting off doing the review for this thing for a little while because I like to play with things for a while. I like to actually really experience them over a month or so. And I've done that now, and I've got a lot of opinions about it. In a lot of ways, it's absolutely awesome, and in some other ways, it's kind of not great at all. Performance is a bit lackluster. Doesn't have that much speed, although the speed is not a big deal when you're driving it. It actually feels quite fast FPV. My issue with it is it's frustrating to drive because it spins out, and not in a controllable, predictable way. If you are a hardcore FPV pilot, then it's really not for you, because you will find it frustrating in the way that its handling is just not repeatable, which is, I think, what we're all after. We don't really mind if the handling is not high performance, but if the handling is not repeatable, it's frustrating because you drive around and then it arbitrarily spins out for no reason, or and it gets stuck all the time and that kind of thing. That's irritating. And for us guys who are coming from the FPV quadcopters, etc., you're expecting, or you're wanting, a machine that really does exactly what you tell it to do, so that you can perform tricks, etc. I mean, we spent ages tuning our quads and tweaking things, etc. We want the optimum in performance, and that's not what this is all about. So if that's what you're after, then I can't recommend it. I would have to recommend that it is fun though. So I would recommend getting a decent quality little RC car of this size and putting in your own AIO camera, and it's a very easy and cheap thing to build anyway. I've actually done videos on it before. However, if you're looking for something for your kid and somebody who's not doing FPV at all, then this is great. I mean, my 6-year-old, he loves it. He drives it around. He doesn't really care if it spins out every now and then. It's completely integrated. He can charge it himself. He can plug it in. He can plug the goggles in. He doesn't need my help to just pick it up and play with it and then charge it up when he's done. And that is awesome. And he is loving FPV.
Reverse, go backwards, go backwards.
And of course, the reason that I got the package is that he can pick up the goggles too and have a set of ride-along goggles. So I know a lot of people who are doing FPV have a high-end set of goggles, your Fat Sharks or whatever, and then maybe an old set of box goggles for ride-along. But if budget is tight, and for me it is, I have a set of Fat Shark Recons as my primary goggles, so it's just a set of box goggles. I couldn't really afford to have a second set just for ride-along. So I took a look at this thing, and it's perfect. The goggles that come with it, they're not super great, but they're perfectly good enough for sharing the experience of FPV for a ride-along. And that way my son gets to play with this toy. He gets to use the goggles when we go flying. We get to participate. He says, fly over here, fly over there, let's go high. It's awesome. So as far as sharing FPV and getting people into FPV, this thing is awesome. If it's actually for yourself, I think there's better ways to do this. The suspension on this thing is obviously not great, but what they've done on the front is they've actually just used a kind of a flexible plastic. So there's like a ton of play in these wheels, but they offer a little bit of shock absorption. Now that's probably something to talk about. The shock absorption is, well, there's also some springs on the back, but even with excellent shock absorption, this thing, the FPV feed across gravel or something would be dreadful. It's just vibrations are crazy, and this does not have excellent shock absorption, so it's pretty bad. If you really want to have an enjoyable FPV experience, you have to drive this thing on glass smooth concrete. That's the perfect. If you've got a shiny shop floor, then that is excellent. If you're driving this on tar or asphalt, then it's going to be pretty rough, but you can see what you're doing. tiles, etc. indoor is pretty good as well. So you just got to keep that in mind, is do you have a place that you can use it? It definitely is not going to work on grass or anything like that. It's just going to get stuck. It doesn't have enough torque, and the steering servo is a little bit weak to handle any sort of terrain that's not great. So I mentioned the goggles earlier, and these are my daily driver Fat Sharks. I'm not using fancy goggles. Those are the Recon V3s, and they're going for about $90 at the moment. These are the Emax goggles that you get with the kit, and it's a $57 thereabouts if you buy them on their own. So if you're wanting to get into FPV for flying, this is just not, it doesn't make sense. Rather get a nice decent set that's got DVR, much higher resolution, really nice user experience, all that stuff. But if you want to get somebody else into FPV, then this kit, all this stuff, is the same price as these goggles. So if you want a set of backup ride-along goggles and you want to get a kid interested in FPV, this thing is spot on, perfect. And you get a set of goggles that somebody else can use. But I wouldn't use these for flying. It's just not a fun experience. But for this current role, they do the job, and they do it pretty well. It's nice that they've got this battery on the back which has an integrated charger, so again you just plug it into a micro USB, which is fantastic. What I really dislike is the fact that it's all bright white inside, so it really breaks the immersion. You just feel like you're staring down a white tunnel, you know. If you compare it to something like these, what I really like about box goggles is this wide angle of view, which also lets you feel really immersed in it, because you don't see anything else and it fills your view. But as soon as you've got this white tunnel effect going on, it really spoils it, in my opinion. Resolution's pretty low as well. Reception's fine, and of course no DVR. So any DVR that you see in this review was recorded on these goggles there. So to open this thing up, you just pop the front off and the sides. There's the camera. It's curious to me, this little connection here looks as though they were planning to put a servo in there at one stage. Maybe that's a future development. There's the USB charger. Okay, let's open this thing up. Pop that antenna through there. There we are, that's what was holding it together. Okay. So, it's nice to see is that this is a real servo, which means if you break it, you can replace it. This transmitter looks very much like the transmitter on the TinyHawk, so I'm sure it's the same thing as that. Wow. Okay, so that's all the battery that's in there. It's a 1S 300 milliamp. That's pretty impressive that it gets this kind of runtime off that battery. These are the two batteries that came with my Emax TinyHawk FreeStyle, which is an awesome drone. I'll put a link in the description. You should probably just buy one. It looks like, yeah, they are definitely designed to fit in. Obviously this is only 1S, I've got two strapped together, but that would be even more runtime. Presumably this is a much slower or lower discharge LiPo, hence its smaller size. And it's got a little bit of control circuitry in there as well, which is probably designed to stop this thing destroying itself. Since there's no OSD, it doesn't warn you when the battery's dead, it just stops working. I would imagine that's what this little circuit here is for. It's just protecting the LiPo from over discharge. You'll probably find that these little shocks pop apart on the rear fairly often. The easiest way to fix them, if they do, is just to take the top ball end off and then reassemble it. Bollocks. Shove it. Totally easy. For Pete's sake. Also, if you want any repair to go easily, the best way to help that happen is to try and record it on video and work through a screen. Here we are. Get back in there, you wonderful piece of plastic, you. Oh gosh darn. There we are. Oh, off screen as well. Fantastic, that's how it worked. And then we just press it back in there with barely any force. There we are. Wonderful. Good as new. Oh, and some crap on the wheel. And I think that is about it for my review. So, if you're the right person, it's the right car. How helpful is that?